my name's Jamie. You might notice I'm not your usual registrar. That would be Killian. I'm the pro-registrar, which is basically Killian's lackey. For about 4 months, this has been working perfectly for me. He does all the registrar speeches. I switch his ADHD meds with Tic Tacs so he forgets to give me work. However, every now and then, Killian will look at a motion, say about the war in Ukraine, and think, you know what, for some reason I don't feel like making jokes about this. So now we're here. Anyway, we have private business to discuss. First of all, there will be a debate with the Iulliaa next Tuesday. For those of you who don't know, the Iulliaa is a subcommittee of the Phil for women and gender minorities. However, their debates are open to people of any gender. The motion on Tuesday is this house would not have kids. So, I forgot we have some members of the HIST with us tonight. Kids are these things that you get when two adults love each other. Don't worry about it. I have an important decree here from Brian Lennon of the Bram Stoker Club. There is no news on when the next paper will be read. However, there are, quote, plenty of papers in gestation. Look, the past 3 times I've run into Brian, he has literally shouted at me, Jamie, have you got a paper for me? And I have to watch the life drain out of his eyes as I say no. It's really the only thing that brings him joy anymore. So I implore you, write that paper for Brian. Now to Phil Maidens. I am reliably informed that that is a thing that we still do. Maidens is an opportunity for beginner debaters to speak in fun motions behind closed doors, so none of the pressure of a whole chamber full of, fuck, that's how people. Now, I know you look at me and you think, wow, I'd give anything to be like that guy. But before Phil Maidens, I was just like you. Before Phil Maidens, I had no friends either. But now, there's Sean. I'm your friend, right, Sean? Sean, say I'm your friend. Sean, say I'm your friend. Say I'm your friend. Sean, say I'm your friend. Say I'm your friend. Sean, say I'm your friend. That wasn't so hard. After the debate, we're going to the Lombard, so I hope to see you all there. Other than that, there will be no further business. The meeting was adjourned.
Hello again. As you are probably already aware, the motion for tonight's debate is this House believes the EU should pursue peace with Russia. Now, I've been informed by the senior member of the Council of the Phil, Mr. David Kelly, that I am not allowed to make any joke about this motion due to its contentious and divisive nature, which isn't ideal for me because I don't really know what else to do with this time. However, I've decided to instead talk about last week's debate in protest. For any Russian oligarchs watching, protest is this thing that we... don't worry about it. Last week's debate was over the motion, this House would prefer a world without profit. This is the summary I wrote directly after the debate in the pub. 3 communists walked onto side proposition, and if that sounds like the start of a joke, don't worry, because they didn't make any. On the opposition, Ethan McCarthy of the road, and let me see. Ethan made history in his speech as he became the 1,000th person to read from the Communist Manifesto in a Phil speech. Everyone give it up for Ethan. I hope he's proud of himself. Ethan, in his tirade against the Communist Manifesto, even went so far as to claim that Karl Marx was ill. Unfortunately, Ethan forgot who he was talking to. The audience, so thrilled at the opportunity for LGBT representation, voted overwhelmingly in favor of side proposition, so the motion was defeated. Which brings us back to our business this week. This week's motion about the war in Ukraine brings up some important and potentially troubling implications, even here in the GMB. For example, is it right that a bigger society could just rope upstairs and annex a room from the Theo? And if not, who would stop us? I mean, them. We have an esteemed panel of speakers tonight. You may know that this is a collaboration with Sophia. I've never actually met her, but I'm told she's a lovely woman. And she's been nice enough to send some of her friends to debate. So thank you, Sophia. In all seriousness, we'll have some very exciting guest speakers. We're thrilled to welcome Iulliaa Osmolovska, who is, among other things, director of the GlobeSec Kyiv office. And this is Iulliaa's knowledge and experience as it relates to the motion today is incredibly admirable, and of course is second only to Ziad, who I think we found lurking on the stairs. We're also excited to welcome Cathal Berry, independent TD for Kildare South. We have Larysa Cathal here, which I will let Annika introduce in more detail. So with that, there will be no further business. The meeting was adjourned.
Are there any objections to me citing these facts as a true and accurate record of the last public business window? There being none, I should duly sign. Everyone, welcome to the University Philosophical Society. The motion that stands before the House tonight is this House believes the EU should pursue peace with Russia. Sitting our reporters are as follows. Speeches are after 7 minutes for students and 10 minutes for guests. After the first minute and before the last minute of each stage will be signified by bell. Speakers from opposing sides and audience members are free to offer points of information. We encourage general audience participation during our debates. If you hear something you like, you can shout hear, hear. If you hear something you don't like, you can shout shade. We prioritize respect during our debates, and as a result, if anyone has any concerns with what's said tonight, our senior member of council, David Kelly, will be around as intact via email at smc@tcd.bill. Alternatively, I am contacting you via president@tcd.com. Without further ado, the speakers tonight's debate. So speaking proposition, we have Charlie Cathal Berry and Marie Collin. And speaking on opposition, we have Ziad Iulliaa Osmolovska and Andrei Flagachenko. Without further ado, are the debate for opposition debate as a whole. Kim here.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us all tonight. Before I get started, I also wanted to say thank you to our special guests, and on behalf of Sophia, the Society for International Affairs, thank you to the film for hosting us tonight. If anyone would like to continue this discourse, you're more than welcome in Sophia at our coffee hours anytime. Before I get into my argument, I think it's very important that I outline the motion and the context that we're dealing with tonight. So this motion asks us to consider the pursuit of peace. It asks us to consider a process. It does not ask us to consider an outcome. So this motion is not binding us to any particular terms of peace or any outcome to this conflict. Rather, it asks us about the process, how we get to peace. And I assume everyone here likes peace generally. So that's what we're working towards, but this asks us to consider a process. So what is peace? Peace, for the purposes of my argument, means lasting and sustainable and fair peace. That's what we have to have for me to consider peace. Lasting and sustainable, because if it's not lasting and sustainable, then we devolve back into a state of conflict and we're no longer in a peaceful situation. It also must be fair, because if it's not fair, it's not going to be lasting, it's not going to be sustainable, and then again, we don't have peace. So for purposes of this motion, that means that peace, the way I'm considering it here in my argument, means that we need a fair, lasting, and sustainable resolution to this conflict. Peace, in the sense that I'm considering it today, means fairness. And I think one argument you might hear tonight that I want you to really think about is that we cannot have a peaceful resolution and a fair resolution. And I reject this notion. I think that is not, that's a false dichotomy. It's a false choice that we're being asked to make when you hear that argument. Because if you look at history, you look at diplomacy works. History shows us that diplomacy works, that you can have peace and you can have fairness. They're not mutually exclusive, and rather I argue that peace necessitates fairness. Peace demands fairness, because as I said earlier, fairness is part of peace. Now it's also very important that we talk about the context for this motion. So of course, this war is one with serious human costs, countless casualties, both in Russia and Ukraine and across the world. But again, that I think we all want to resolve that. We all want peace here. It's just a question of how to get there. So we then have to consider the EU's involvement in this conflict. And the EU, of course, is directly affected economically in particular, and I'll get into that later. But there's, I think, a real potential for escalation here because Putin's wars have never ended with Ukraine. The reasons for starting this conflict are debated, but I think primarily two of them are he's an imperialist ruler. He's an imperialist and brutal dictator. And it's important that the EU acknowledge that this conflict does not end in Ukraine. It's important that the EU acknowledge that in its strategy through the pursuit of peace. Because if we do not pursue peace, again, I ask you to consider this question. What is the alternative? What are we doing if we do not pursue peace? If we don't at least give diplomacy a chance, peace a chance to work, then what is the alternative? So I ask you to consider that question. I also ask you to consider the question to ask yourselves, are peace and fairness mutually exclusive? I don't believe they are. I don't believe that history shows us that they are. And then I also want to now get into the kind of context globally as well. I think the EU is obviously becoming more and more involved. They must because of the economic consequences, but also because if my fellow Americans recklessly elect Donald Trump in 33 days, then the situation changes on a global scale. And Donald Trump, his version of ending this war is Russia winning this war. And I hope that we all agree that that cannot happen, that must be avoided. And to avoid that, it becomes even more important that the EU then pursue peace. So having said that, I'm now going to the economic and human reasons for peace. This war has caused countless casualties in Ukraine and Russia, and the human cost provides a compelling reason for peace in and of itself. So too to the economic state of these two countries, the EU and the world. Since the war broke out, the GDP of Eurozone countries has suffered. Economic struggles in Eastern and Central European countries, including Poland, have given way to economic instability and potential political instability as well, which provides more of a threat. Further, Ukraine is a major grain supplier in the global supply chain. Pre-war, 90% of grain was exported in Ukraine. Much of it going to developing economies and countries in Northern Africa, which were highly reliant on this grain and are now suffering the economic and human costs of that. As 1.7 billion people globally have experienced hunger and 276 million face severe food insecurity worldwide. That is a crisis. And the fastest way we can resolve that to end the immense human and economic suffering is through peace. Thus, the EU has an obligation to pursue peace, to end this suffering, and ensure that we can live in a secure world. It is also in the security interests of the EU to pursue peace with Russia. I again ask the question, what is the alternative? Diplomacy can prevent the escalation of global conflicts such as this one. In fact, many believe diplomacy could have prevented this. As I said, Putin's wars do not end with Ukraine. He has shown no interest in de-escalation, but that does not mean the EU should not pursue peace and diplomacy. The issue of Putin's imperialism will not go away on its own. It must be faced by the EU in a way it has failed thus far to do. Where should that way be peace? This motion, again, only asks about a process, not an outcome. It does not propose peace at any cost or at any cost, nor does it propose a resolution that fails to acknowledge the severity of Russia's crimes. It proposes a process in which the EU can deal with this issue while minimizing further suffering. So again, I implore you to consider those questions that I brought up today, to consider the human costs that come from continuing this war, to ask yourself, what is the alternative? As this conflict continues beyond Ukraine, the alternative. We can pursue peace. Again, that does not bind us to anything. That's not saying peace at any cost. It's just saying pursue peace, looking at peace, trying to solve these problems diplomatically before we start a global catastrophe. I propose this motion and urge you all to do the same because diplomacy in the pursuit of peace is in fact the only thing that can keep us from destroying ourselves. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Charlotte for the rare speech and call on Sid to open the case for side position. Here.
I'm going to use some powerful language at some points. Like, so trigger warning for that, just because this is a heavy topic, and so some heavy language will have to be used. It won't be too graphic, it should be fine. Cool. After the Soviet Union collapsed, which you can hear more about in Chamber next week on Wednesday, Ukraine inherited a fuckload of nukes. They had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and they only gave it up on the condition that they would be guaranteed security by and by Russia. And now Russia has invaded and has admittedly invaded and has allegedly engaged in war crimes such as destroying medical infrastructure and destroying cultural sites, have invaded huge amounts of sexual violence and destroying and torturing Ukrainian prisoners of war. Population would spit on that security guarantee and break bread with those responsible. I say nay. I firstly want to be clear on burdens within this debate, because the first speaker from population seems to think that pursuing peace is basically anything you engage in that ultimately will lead to peace in the long term. I think that does unfortunately make this debate incredibly broad, because presumably pursuing peace would also look like, in the worst case scenario, bombing a country into oblivion so that eventually you get sustainable peace. I don't think that that is realistically what this debate is about. I don't think we're on the side of indefinitely fighting Russia forever and never ceding to any sort of peace or ceasefire. I don't think population will end the side of it's like Russia just gives in to all our demands, then that was like, and then we accept peace. That is us pursuing peace. I think realistically, it is about prioritization. It is about prioritizing peace versus sovereignty or the cultural integrity of Ukraine. I think it looks like on our side of the house, the alternative, which they want to say includes pursuing peace, but where it goes is literally just not debate. I think it looks like continuing to sanction Russia, continuing to engage in these boycotts, continuing to provide weapons and means for Ukraine to continue to defend themselves versus, and like making very clear that if Russia were to give up the continuous offensive and was grant to borders previously drawn, that then we would like stop doing all that stuff. Versus coming to the table in the first place and engaging in diplomacy preemptively. Being able on the side, we have tried diplomacy. It is not a new idea. We have tried diplomacy before. In various instances throughout history, we tried diplomacy with Hitler after World War II happened. Diplomacy is always the first port of call. We only engage in these sorts of things after, and I think that is the type of stuff we want to continue to engage on opposition. Firstly then, what happens when you engage in the act of pursuing peace, just being more firm about it? I think it gives Putin substantially more leverage in negotiations that happen for two reasons. The first is there is just an optical set of weakness that now exists within the EU and the West as a whole. It comes across as the fact that people grant have the appetite to continue in these sorts of sanctions and provide the extent of weapons that we are to Ukraine. And so there is still a secular light at the end of the tunnel, and so Putin is able to continue to do whatever he wants. He has more leverage. But secondly, there's internal desperation that happens a lot more on our side of the house. That is so, at the point where you were able to pretend that you were able to continue doing it for a longer time, Putin is really worried and his efforts are going to go to waste. The people who are also allied with Putin and working with Putin in his cabinet, etc., are really worried that the EU isn't going to acquiesce and we do eventually have to put up this conflict. I think that's incredibly important, because the player Putin has access to more leverage, you get substantially worse outcomes, because the peace or lasting peace you're likely to end up having is going to be worse. It's going to be worse, such as Russia can keep Donbass or other areas of Ukraine, which I think is categorically unacceptable. I think the evidence to why Donbass should be fine with Russia is that firmly, right? It's a referendum that independent bodies is able to meaningfully certify, or it's the fact that a lot of people in these areas speak Russia. A lot of people in Ireland speak English, and don't want to be part of the United Kingdom. For all these reasons, right, I think at the point where you actively pursue peace, it makes it easier for Putin to effectively achieve world growth within this conflict and deny Ukrainians their sovereignty of their border. The second thing I want to talk about then is where we had the capacity to actually withstand this sort of stuff, because I imagine a lot of things the populace are going to talk about is, the prices go up. And the first thing I want to say is that I think we are just substantially more economically resilient than Russia is. We are substantially more diverse in terms of our economies, in terms of our trade policy, in terms of things we do. This is Iran is historically reason for this, but the big one is the US likes us quite a lot, and so we're able to do a lot of trade with them, and the US is a huge economy that's relatively diverse because of the fact that it's transitioned to various different soldiers. That's stuff I can talk about here, but whatever, who cares? No one's here for an econ lesson. But the second thing I want to point out is, we have $300 billion plus Russian assets seized, right? And the reason we can do that, don't do the reverse, is because nobody in the EU likes to keep their assets in Russia before the conflict, because that would be a crazy thing to do. And it's fair if we just add more leverage into their borrow in terms of these assets, that is money we can use to continue to subsidize stuff in internally to make Ireland safe more affordable, but also money we can use to continue to support Ukraine in the conflict going on. But finally then on oil specifically, I'll never point out there are various things we can do, even if there is a shortage of oil. So you can ration energy use like Germany did, such that people eat in their house or bread like it's rationed, they're like probably like we're going to be safe anyway. We can do that to effect to make sure nobody has to die in these winters. But the second thing is that we have the capacity to transition towards energy independence, right? Because the huge amount of tariffs on Chinese solar panels for some reason would be more than asking to sell solar panels to us if we wanted to become more energy independent and more energy resilient. We have the capacity to develop no wind farms within Ireland and the rest of Ireland or within Scotland or within every part of Europe. And so it's unappreciated that we have to now all this oil in the first place. I would just point out becoming more being for the world is also just a good thing independent of anything. I think that's probably a good reason to not pursue peace in this way. But the third thing I want to point out is like the US has sent out oil because actually like the panic amount of oil they have like just hidden in Alaska that they probably would export if they needed to within the situation. Finally then, we are likely that Russia is going to yield. The first thing I want to point out is Putin is just incredibly old. He's like 71, and even if he's not going to die soon, his mental faculties are likely to decline in the future. And so the extent to which he has so austerity over the things that Russia does is heavily diminished. The second thing I want to point out is that there are many internal stability issues because people in Russia are sick and tired of this conflict, not because the people die, but also the cost that they're suffering to their economy. I think that needs to get more things like the attempted Wagner coup, and some of these things are likely to be successful, as like Bill said once, you have to get lucky each time, you have to get lucky once. But finally, I think that when you're able to engage in an increased amount of like sanctions, I had cultural sanctions against Russia, we do have more internal tension. The people whose assets are seizing get angry at Putin and they ran to pushing out. I think at the point where you actively pursue peace, it is perceived that they're right at the end of the tunnel. So they really like you to persist and continue to engage in the types of atrocities that they do. And then on our side of the house, we don't let that seem to be an option, they're more likely to react because they realize we're likely to continue to do it indefinitely, and that is the point where they say we should give up. The final thing that often might happen is this idea that you like to ride the air of the conflict. The first problem of this is unclear to me the extent to which this happened, because presumably if you give up now, then when you eventually get the peace, it's not going to be a lasting peace, because Putin knows that you just give up the red in the future. But the second is this an insanely reductive way of interpreting utility or whatever. Like, you wouldn't kill one person to save 5 of the people or whatever. I think a similar sort of logic here apply, right? Because the long-term consequence of that sort of logic is anyone with a smaller military should already just surrender because it's the best way to serve lives. I think that's kind of crazy, and I don't think that's what the Ukrainian people want. But I'm not here to speak on behalf of the people of Ukraine. I want you guys to think to yourselves, if somebody invaded your home and killed and tortured and raped your neighbors, would you want the people who you call allies to dispense that person, or would you want them to continue to sanction that until they're able to come to the table and like force it their right to the terrorists to a territory? For all of these reasons, opposition.
I'd like to thank Fiona the very good association Columbus for tuning the pace beside proposition. You're here.
It's hosting. So that really isn't too early than I thought it was going to be, you know. So this is all the man hesitant. That's Sadker. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your kind invitation to be here tonight. I'm delighted to be here, actually. And such a prestigious campus, and in front of such exalted company. Cathal is my name, and if you're not Irish and you want to try and remember it, just think of alcohol and drop the L, you get Cathal. That's just a complete coincidence, just so you know. So the merge before us tonight is whether this House should believe that the EU should pursue peace with Russia. And I want to be absolutely associated with the comments of Charlotte, who spoke as part of our team earlier on. It's entirely appropriate. Peace is the ultimate goal. This motion doesn't say how peace is to be achieved, though. And my suggestion is peace should be achieved through victory. So we should go and negotiate hard and use hard diplomacy in relation to Russia. So our red lines, the EU's red lines, will be very, very clear. Number 1, an immediate ceasefire. Number 2, all troops withdraw behind their internationally recognized borders. And number 3,
Russia should pay Ukraine significant sums to make up for all the damages caused over the last number of years. Now, there's a problem with that theory. The first theory of negotiating is both parties must want to negotiate. The EU is keen to negotiate. Channels of communication are wide open, but Russia does not want to negotiate. So Russia must be made to negotiate. And the only way Russia can be dragged to the negotiating table is if they are militarily defeated on the battlefield. And that's entirely compatible with what the opposition is proposing. It's not a peace through weakness. It's not peace through surrender. It's peace through victory.
Imagine
Yes.
of the Ukraine side, showing even assuming the shape pieces per ship so far.
Absolutely. They have a 10-point peace plan, which I'm sure my colleague will mention. But also, why should they surrender or give any concessions? We'll chat about it afterwards. They're completely in the right. And I want to back up my opposition colleague here, because when we talk about peace, we're saying, yeah, let's go back to the way things were. Because in 1994, there was a peace treaty, and it's called the Budapest Memorandum. It's completely available on Google, and it's only 2.5 pages long. And it's signed by the President of Ukraine, President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin at the time. So we have John Major from the UK, and William J. Clinton from the US. And I'm just going to read 3 sentences from the document. It's very, very clear. It just says, Russia, the UK, and the US reaffirms their commitment to respect the independence, the sovereignty, and the existing borders of Ukraine. Very, very clear. It also says they reaffirm their obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or the triple independence of Ukraine. And I love the third sentence. 3 countries, they reaffirm their commitment to seek immediate United Nations Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine if Ukraine should become a victim of an act of aggression. The irony does not escape me. So where are we so far? I'm in favor of a peaceful resolution of this conflict. But it's peaceful. Russia is not interested in negotiating yet. But they were very interested in negotiating in 1917 when they surrendered. And the reason they surrendered to the Central Powers of Germany, because they were defeated on the battlefield. The reason they became in 1917, why? Because they were defeated in the battlefield. And that's the common language of the Russian Federation, and in particular, the current regime in the Kremlin listen to. The third point I want to make, so peace is not a weakness. And we have to be very, very wary of not appeasing. I'm sure you will have Winston Churchill said about an appeaser. An appeaser is someone who feeds a crocodile, hoping that the crocodile will eat him last. So we're not interested in appeasement in any shape or form. Because if you are, because appeasement is tempting, it gives you a lot of satisfaction in the short term. But in the long term, other dictators and totalitarian regimes will just go, wow, okay, Russia got away with that. We're going to try something similar on the Taiwan Strait or elsewhere in the world. Answer, the people with nuclear weapons might say, I was thinking of getting rid of my nuclear weapons, but I saw it happen to Ukraine, and I don't want to go down that road. Or some countries who don't have nuclear weapons, but why not even considering it? They might say, actually, we saw it happen to Ukraine, they were carved up, how about we ourselves? So the reason for the Budapest referendum in 1994 was the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine got its independence, it had lots of nuclear warheads and missiles, and the Americans said, we'd rather not have an additional nuclear power. How about you give your nuclear missiles and weapons and warheads back to the Russians, and we will give you security guarantees. So the reason we should be very, very careful about a peace treaty with Russia is we know it's not worth the paper it's written on. So where are we so far? We're in resolution of this conflict. That does not imply weakness. It implies hard diplomacy. Russia does not want to come to the table yet. They must be dragged. And the best way to drag it is to militarily defeat it on the battlefield. And thirdly, we are not interested in appeasement. We are interested in dragging Belgians to the negotiating table and issuing them terms. just like what happened in 1917. The third reason why we should pursue peace, it's in Ireland's vital national interests to do so. We're a very small country. We would like our borders to be respected, and the best way to ensure that our borders are respected is that every country's borders are respected. There was 100,000 Ukrainians in Ireland, which is great for them and for us, but some of them don't want to be here. They're here under duress, they want to go home. And peace will allow them to go home, take pressure off the rural housing market here. But most importantly, Ireland does not want the conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine to merge. There's a lot of overlap in relation to the actors there. The US, Iran, Russia. Two large conflicts merging, not a good thing. It's called a world war, and they're never over by Christmas, even though people think they are. Yes. And then the last thing I want to say is that we have to look at the origin of this conflict. Some people would say that this conflict was caused by NATO stoking up tensions, or the eastward advance of NATO. But we all know the reality that NATO is not advancing to the east. It is countries in the east leaning to the west, begging to join NATO because of Finland and Sweden joined NATO not before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but after, and not just after, but as a direct consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we have to be very, very clear about what the main root cause of this, and the main root cause of this conflict is Russia does not want a prosperous, peaceful, progressive country on its doorstep. So in summary, and I'm going to finish on this note, he should pursue peace at all times. Not peace through weakness, but peace through strength. Not peace through weakness, but peace through victory. And the final way that can be achieved is on the battlefield. The European Union should have two strategies. One, a negotiating strategy with three red line issues non-negotiable. We spoke about it already: ceasefire, withdrawal of troops, and reparations to Ukraine. In tandem with the negotiating strategy, there should be a military strategy. The EU should provide the munitions and weapons for Ukraine to defend itself, and it should withdraw restrictions to allow these weapons to be used deep inside Russia. And thirdly, I believe Ireland should be doing more. We are providing €220 million at the moment, which is good, but it's only for non-lethal weapons. You can't stop tanks with blankets and biscuits. We need bombs and bullets. And if it wasn't for what Ukraine are doing at the moment, there'd be Russian armor on the Polish border at the moment, probably in the Baltic countries, and probably all in Ukraine as well. So Ireland at least should be providing air defence munitions, or allowed €220 million to buy radars and stratosphere missiles and anti-aircraft artillery. You can't have a lethal effect on something that's not alive. The munitions can be just projectiles. They're not alive. So by definition, you can't have a lethal effect. So in summary, I'll finish on this. Yeah, I can say they're absolutely the peaceful resolution of this. The European Union is ready for peace and for negotiations, and the EU is ready when Russia is ready. Russia is currently not ready. They must be made ready. So we're saying peace, not at all costs, peace through victory, and the sooner that happens, the better off we'll all be. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor for their speech and all of this for which most of the indicates for side opposition. Give here, sir.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this honor to speak to you, and thank you for society for this challenge. Actually, I'm not a politician or as a diplomat, but I'd like to pass the question. I think that there is not a coherency inside what the proposition is talking about, because there is definitely devil is in detail. If you're asking for the peace, and if you're asking for the peace framed like the colleagues just described, I'm pretty sure that you won't have a coherent position within those who are supporting you, like what we see right now among our partners that we are trying
to get on our board. So, with reference to what's been said already by the proponent, I just want to clarify. The thing about peace and fair peace, yes, nobody is against this, right? But the point is that the perception of peace and the fairness is different of the parties. And Russia definitely is not looking at peace through the eyes that you are looking at it. Definitely for Russia, peace is being a very strong, bloody neighbor who can impose the rules on other neighbors and just destroy all the international legal order. This is the peace in Russian eyes. How would you like to pursue a peace with someone who sees it completely different? I'm just wondering. Then the next point is about the way how to get there. It reminded me of the famous joke of Shimon Peres when he came back from the negotiations with the Arabians, and he said, I've got two news for you. The first is there is a light at the end of tunnel. Everybody wants peace. And second is a bad one. There is no tunnel at all, because nobody knows how to get there. This is exactly what you're talking about right now. So you asked about alternative. What is alternative? If you stop right now, it means if you get into this kind of a sort of negotiations, so it means the partition of the country. It means the partition of Ukraine. Let's just step back and get the side to the country, to your homeland, to Ireland. Something that you've experienced 100 years ago. When the country, this city, the other cities, had been witnessing these dramatic events of the Civil War, which ended up in negotiated solutions with the Government Silence Act of 1920. Did it stop the war? Did it stop the war? I mean, literally, the country, this population was not very happy about this decision. And this was not the end. This was not the solution to the problem. It just created a number of buildings that had been multiplied by decades. We're talking about the difference. When you're talking about Ukraine, there is a tiny difference, or two tiny differences. The first one, Ukraine is 10 times larger than Ireland. So basically, those we're asking for peace with Russia right now, implicitly implying partition of the country and multiplication of these problems that your country had for decades. For the whole Europe, because having the country, the failed state, which bordering 3 countries of NATO on the eastern flank, means instability for your country. You're talking about the cost? Okay, let's compare with the potential costs of a failed state on the border with the EU. Sir, you have to sustain the next migration waves from Ukraine. You have to support us with never-ending reconstruction. You have to take care about this constant threat of attacking nuclear power plants in Ukraine with potential contamination of all Europe. You even can be facing the necessity to deploy peacekeeping troops at the borderline when you will set in Ukraine. Are you ready to send your people for these peacekeeping troops to Ukraine? With Russia. So the second distinction is about neighbor. If I may put it this way, you here in Ireland are quite lucky to have this big permanent neighbor as UK, because UK is not like Russia. Ukraine didn't bomb you afterwards when the peace settlement was achieved. Ukraine didn't rape and torture your people after that. UK did not do what Russia is doing right now to us. Every day, we don't have any single night without alerts in Kiev. Just in Kiev, they've sent over 3,300 kamikaze drones every day on the whole country within the last months. You ready to sustain these consequences for indefinite future? I highly doubt that this is a very good perspective. So, getting back to what you said, diplomacy works, especially diplomacy in EU terms works. How it works? Let me remind you. Minsk Accords, 2014, 2015, did they prevent the full-scale invasion to Ukraine? Did they prevent the left? No, it didn't. When you start talking of pursuing kind of negotiations with Russia, you have to understand first how Russia negotiates. For Russia, negotiations is not a formal fight. They're going to defeat you at the negotiation table. So I really wondering, how do you see dragging Russia to negotiations through victory of Russia. Do you imagine this literally, how the EU could do it, dragging Russia to a negotiation table? I highly doubt that this is attainable. So the only solution to this is complete unconditional victory of Ukraine in the battlefield. And for this, we need your support. We need your help. We need your systems. We need your principles. Because talking about let's negotiate with Russia, what it simply means? It simply means that you're ready to close your eyes on all this brutal ignorance, disregard that Russia made against international legal order and law. And just, okay, let's forget about this. Let's forget about it. You've destroyed the system that you've built for decades after the Second World War. We are ready to talk to you. What would you like to have right now? I don't think that this is the point of these negotiations with Russia. We need to show strength first. We need to show the victory. We need to have stable Ukraine on the border with the eastern flank of NATO countries. And this is how we can achieve a sustainable solution for decades. You think that's quite behind the time, right? 2 minutes. Okay. So then I may probably leave this time for some other speakers that would like to speak. I think I've said enough.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Osmolovska for her very nice speech and call on Warren to close the biggest Versailles composition. Here.
Best. Esteemed guests, I am delighted to be invited here to speak this evening, and thank you very much to the forum for having me. It is my responsibility to come up with some rebuttals to what was said. I think, given the circumstances and given how sensitive this topic is, I don't think it's appropriate for me to nitpick certain things that people have said. One thing that did stand to me was that it was argued that we were incoherent. We were not incoherent so far in our speeches. Throughout our speeches, we discussed peace, victory, and most importantly, vindication. Vindication of the rights that were heavily breached, the crimes against humanity that have been committed over the last 2 years and which continue to occur on a daily basis. You know, the proposition, we don't have all the answers. We can't have all the answers. And there is no way that we can. Never would myself or anyone else in the proposition pardon these crimes against humanity that have occurred. Equally, I don't think it's appropriate to ever rout off the restoration of relations with any country. Not at the moment, so. When writing this debate, I've heard about the statement, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And I wondered, was this appropriate for the conversation? At first I thought, no. But then I thought to myself, actually, that does make a bit of sense. Because after peace, strictly speaking, is the freedom from disturbance. That is not friendship. That is not pardoning inhumane, atrocious acts that have occurred. It is making things right, recognizing wrongs, and moving forward. That's not without reparations. They still are to come. They in the heart of the peace negotiating and with the flag of treaty and peace. Peace was achieved between the Allies and the Axis powers in World War II. As I said, I'm aware of the atrocities occurring in Ukraine, and not for a split second will I ignore that. I'm not arguing for an instant pursuit of peace. Let me without that. Reparations are due, and we must review the lessons learned from those world wars. There is another country as well who needs to learn those lessons, but that's a conversation for another night. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz opined, a future with Ukraine must include Russia. When we are discussing peace, they're in conversation. You might not want them to be there, but they have to be there. One of the main reasons, of course, for pursuing peace with Russia is economic in nature. The world has seen an economic slump due to sanctions placed on Russia. Whereas gas lines were stretched, multiple global corporations had to cease operations in Russia for the very right reasons. Those sanctions were valid, and if we were to go back, we would do it again. But that being said, there has been a sharp decline. There has been a real impact on the global economy. If we are to look for peace, we need to look at the economy, we need to look at the economic system, and we must look at Russia and have them in the picture. The global cost of living never really recovered since 2022. Europe's breadbasket is still under pressure, and this has affected the cost price of everyday goods alike. Not for a second will I argue that should be changed, that was wrong, it was very right. But until we pursue peace with Russia, the global economy will not recover. As well as that, the vivid cultural differences seen in the EU between its Western members and its Eastern members are so clear. And my second point is about the cultural difference that we face in the EU. Then the original members who joined back before even the European Economic Community, not now, and what has happened since the demise of the Soviet Union, and we had its greater accession in, we accepted new people into the European Union, but we did not change the European Union to fit this new culture, this different culture. There's a sharp contrast. There was little effort to understand their cultures that in ways can be quite similar to Russia, which in Western Europe will never fully understand. Even now, we're looking further to the east. Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, both former Soviet Union states, are now looking at joining the EU. We must be trying to understand their cultures, and so much that is similar to that of Russia's. If we want to understand them, should be working with Russia, they should not be with other. Unfortunately, as it is with human fate, we live in a superiority complex. In politics and business, we live in a man's world where misogyny and income inequality is imminent. Similarly, in the EU, it is dominated by Germany and France, and truly it is a world where Eastern European countries were invited into a system that played perfectly to Western Europe's affairs. Very little has changed since the Grand Accession in the early 2000s. And this leaves our goal to swerve in and succeed where the EU fails to look after Eastern Europe and different cultural differences we have. Of course, the most important reason for pursuing peace with Russia is for the restoration of peace within Ukraine. In Ireland, over 100,000 Ukrainians have fled here. In Europe, over 6 million Ukrainians have sought refuge. According to the United Nations Human Rights Council, this is the largest displacement since World War II. While these people are welcome in Ireland, we're not here, and despite a very small number of Saudi wanting them to feel that they're not welcome, we're all welcome. A lot of these people don't want to be here. They want to return home. They want to go back to their families, to their communities. Unfortunately, those communities are torn. They were destroyed. Family homes ruined. Those left just burst for certain spots. There are even if the war was to end tomorrow, there wouldn't be homes to return to. There wouldn't be schools to return to. But we can't, of course, we will always blame Russia for this. It was their fault. And actually so that we will blame them. But if we do not pursue peace, we can have no chance of restoring what was once there. Complacency will get us nowhere. Russia has been seen as the enemy for decades, and in many cases for the right reason. From the gulags to its autocratic regime, and now to its war crimes, there are plenty of reason to bestow that title upon Russia. But until we move towards peace, our economic partners will never return. Our cultural differences between the West and the East will be resolved and misunderstood. And of course, until we aim for peace with Russia, said displacement will continue, and said communities will never be rebuilt. To circle back to my initial statement, keep your friends closer, your enemies closer. Russia is not our friend.
Russia has brought harm and terror to innocent people and has taken too many lives. But keeping a distance from Russia leaves us no better option, and does even less for the victims of their atrocities. Thank you, Larry, for your vote in favor of the proposition. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Corey for their very quick speech and call on to close the debate as a whole. Carried.
I find myself to be reading a fairly late years of my attempts the bird schools. I would like to extend the applause also to a colleague of mine who provided quite of read links and things I'm going to say on library here. One misinterpret Russia's reasons for war. It was not territory, and the material would be happy to occupy the whole of Ukraine. It was not the people. Ukrainians obviously are not natural to the Russians. It was not before and later, as those for 20 years now. But rather, it is the visual security of Putin, the imperial mindset of the Russian Revolution, and semi-mystical vision of Russia's greatness and ordained historic spiritual weakness. The problem with this is that these not can be addressed by any peace document that does not show Russia's mindset to its core. The effects of that mindset can easily be seen if you think to yourselves, how do you remember a peace for Russia? Ask yourself, when was the last time Russia truly at peace? What peaceful messages do you remember from Russia since 1991? South Ossetia and Abkhazia in Georgia, Transnistria in Moldova, Church Red Rose, Georgia again in 2003, was a Crimea, Donbass, Syria, and the first two invasion of Ukraine. For a country that allegedly never starts wars and is always in defense, it finds itself in defense rather to ethanol. Out of the last 33 years, Russia had 7 peaceful years. And that's only after the fall of the Soviet Union, not about before it. So for 2015 election at 20 years ago, Russia has defined around 400 international agreements where Russia and Ukraine were signatories. Memorandums, charters, agreements, all was developed. There is quite a full script attributed to this. No treaty with Russia is worth the paper it's written on. Whatever documents you made them sound, it was remembered the second it becomes an inconvenience for them. We had a paper to bail it out and say, peace will I die! And that's it. He had stacks of papers like that, and we can see how well that's working out. There are people who are optimists and maybe a bit naive who think that anything is possible. Let's put them a chance. Just one more chance. Please, just let us through there. It's been about sometimes before, but just time, I promise. Also, there are people who have an emotional and moral intelligence of where artwork from Shrek. Or when peace specs now, whatever the cost, for the reasons of economy and save lives. The Spencer recruit is well conducted with standing in there by which a sacrifice I'm willing to make. It was obvious the burden of peace in this world should be on the aggressor, not on the victim. But for both two types of people, I have another counter-argument. We'll come to the signing of the peace deal. Here are your signing requests. We will be shooting hands with people sending rockets into residential buildings, shelling libraries, theaters, museums, destroying children's hospitals, hundreds of thousands murdered, tens of millions dispersed, women raped, wounded, killed, children separated from their mothers and sent to concentration camps. A person who did that just one of those things in the Western society will be a pariah and will have talk to him. Just Istanbul, left to the Russian Revolution, is a huge layer that Newton was shot on. For anybody arguing that EU-Russia peace would end the world quicker, and sending that would be an order, I would like to advise them to try that road carefully.
because there will be new levels of people still living in the occupied territories to inhumane conditions. Ukrainians living under Moscow's rule are killed for speaking their language, and with time will be used as cannon fodder for the Kremlin's next rule. We have already seen this happen with residents of Iulliaa after 2014. Whatever remains under Russian control will be turned into Bucha and Izzy. If Russia is not defeated, this cycle will not stop. It all comes back down to the Russian mentality and worldview. Unfortunately, some aspects haven't changed since the time of Tsarist Russia. We all had heard of early chatcats, that's the rest castaway stories. Russian understanding of the world is a kind of fatalistic, not a physical one, where the strong impose their will on others, and that manifests in the political outlook of Russia onto the world. This is now encapsulated by Lenin's idea of bad souls, in which Russia is compared to a true versus. Her similar with huge vigor, but without any obvious reason for doing that. Gesture, where are you ordering? He demands, she doesn't. So then at least with either defense, either leadership, stand aside and make room for her. I sense that she will with exceptional present in those rise. Russians believe that Russia is spiritually ordained to be different, to be feared by others, to rule others. And if we will learn to dominate, and we will stop at effort to achieve that, that idea cannot coexist with democracy, human life, lives of other emotions to exist. No piece of paper and change that. And will defeat to alter the understanding of the world, understanding that is as arrogant to you as it is to the Ukrainians. Everywhere, there will be no peace with Russia, however much you desire it. Peace agreements for Russia now is an operational affairs. They're treated as a moment of respite used for consolidating resources for future work. We started many times before, and it will happen again. Whatever document you have, it will not guarantee anything. Everything is between millions of Ukrainians now, and condemn the lives of Ukrainian Europeans to a bigger, even brutal work in the future. I believe in peace will flex truth, not to through surrender. Peace through diplomacy in Ukraine has been tried multiple times and failed. We are now reaping the results of these fallacies. There is an existential civilizational project in the Kremlin, which is leading Russia to cause more destruction, to a perpetual state of war. There is no such thing as Russia before war. No peace for Russia to return to. It can only be created by a major defeat. Until then, it is yet all Ukrainians' heart to our danger. Countries bordering Russia has handled land defense and combating propaganda more vigorously, because they know what was to come should Ukraine lose. And the counter-argument, they should have nothing to fear, because you're on the opposite side of Europe will not suffice, as I would like to remind you of the recent news of Russian espionage on the Belarus. Russia merely exercises just outside the Irish Sea in the west. Russian submarines in the Irish Sea and the entrance of the Kirk Harbor who needed to be spurted out by the British helicopter because Irish Air Force has no force to force them out. The largest Russian embassy in Europe and all the world is not sure for entertainment. Our foolish act would rise of a famous Ukrainian poet, Iulliaa Osmolovska. Where are we looking at the nations? Today it's us, tomorrow it's you.
I'd like to thank Honor for their very gratifying speech. And before we go to the vote, I'd like to thank all the speakers and Sophia for the collaboration. Thank you. Just a reminder that there is a blind reception in the next room at Trinity and then in just called in Lombard. So now, without further ado, we will vote. When I call all those in favor will say aye, and when I call on those that Against the motion, you will say nay. So all those in favor of the motion? All those against the motion? Nay. Motion falls. Thank you, everyone. Great.